Good morning to you from Baghdad. Baghdad at the moment is completely shrouded in a red dust storm. The rain has started as well, but a few minutes ago we heard 5 loud explosions. It's impossible for me to see anything beyond about 10 yards from my balcony, but believe me, we heard what was happening. I've no idea where the strikes were, what was being used, cruise missiles or bombs or missiles from coalition strike jets, but certainly the shock waves came sweeping across our balcony. We heard those okay, but this is just part of the continued daylight attacks on Baghdad that have been continuing since the first light this morning, when it was a bit clearer, but another dust storm has descended on us. But the biggest news here is that 2 missiles seem to have struck a crowded marketplace in a district called Shab in the north of the city. And I believe that at least 15 people have been killed. I've been told that as many as 30 may have been injured. Those figures could change.
The non-Iraqis, mostly Al-Qaeda and Iranian Mujahideen Khalq groups that have been going to our families, knocking at the doors, taking anybody who's 15 to 78 years old and asking them to resist, and they have the death and execution squads behind them. So this is a war of liberation. This is about 300 million Americans to be free from terrorists and almost 30 million Iraqis to be free from this Holocaust. This is a war of liberation. This is about to bring freedom to the Iraqi people and to clear all the terrorists who are being harbored by Saddam. I talked to my family yesterday in Baghdad, and also I talked to my relatives in Basra. I asked them specifically if they've seen any missiles falling on civilian neighborhoods or if the American planes have been targeting them. They completely denied that.
All through the night, they finally got that Bradley engine up and running this morning. It was going back to the command headquarters here, which is less than a half a mile away, and the engine blew up, and the Bradley, caught on fire. I mean, everybody's fine, but I mean, it just shows you just the unrelenting toll that this weather and, of course, just the wear and tear on this equipment from traveling hundreds of miles up from northern Kuwait takes to now this position in south central Iraq. Having said that, they're telling us that the attrition rate on the equipment is about what they had expected. They've lost 1 tank, or at least it's down right now. They've lost 2 or 3 Bradleys down right now, but the rest of the force is still up and running smoothly, prepared to take on these heavily armed Republican Guard divisions in the days to come. John? I mean, they know that they have no ability to fight these large American divisions force to force, although that fight will come closer to Baghdad in the coming days. But what they're doing is they're doing these sniping operations. I may have mentioned you or to Chris a short time ago that we had one group come toward these soldiers yesterday, an Iraqi dressed in what looked like an American uniform, which they either had stolen or had bought to look like the 3rd Infantry Division uniforms. It turned out, after he'd been shot and killed, because they could tell that he was a threat, that he was heavily mined or armed with explosives and had been, in fact, a suicide bomber driving a fuel truck toward these positions.
Rob Morrison, we just heard from him in Qatar at Central Command, and Kerry Sanders on the move with the 2nd Battalion, 8th Regiment. But now at 1 minute past the hour, let's check the headlines. U.S. Central Command is checking into reports that 2 U.S. missiles landed on a residential and commercial street in Baghdad, killing at least 14 civilians. Military officials cannot confirm the damage was caused by U.S. missiles. The incident is sparking cries among Iraqis to rally behind Saddam Hussein.
I'm going to give you today's update, and afterwards we'll pause for questions. And there's a military vehicle that's positioned up underneath of it. You'll see it attacked. The weapon comes in from the far right underneath of the bridge, and the bridge remains intact afterwards. A multiple rocket launcher in the vicinity of An Najaf in central Iraq. A hardened air shelter near Karbala in central Iraq. The next one is a tank, also in Karbala, in a revetted position. And finally, a military headquarters building near Karbala. Our direct attacks against regime command, control, communications, and integrated air defense continue.
Reportedly in a southerly direction for a confrontation with U.S. Marines around Naziriyah, with some of the heaviest fighting has been seen.
But he cautions the fight is far from over. Coalition forces say they killed as many as 200 Iraqi foot soldiers in a fierce battle near Najaf in central Iraq. Elements of the Army's 7th Cavalry were involved in that fight. A sandstorm prevented Allied planes from coming in and helping from the air.
We are learning that it could be both the Republican Guard, the Medina Division, and or also the Fedayeen Saddam.
开战前，电视台就不时播放爱国歌曲，展示武力。而开战后这7天以来，海山不断在电视上发表谈话。
Surface-to-air missile sites, a communications facility about 6/10 of a mile to the east does not appear to be a military communications facility, but linked to the north, and that neighborhood is near some strategic targets, and perhaps that may explain why it is. We do have the B-2 video now. Let's also take a look at that, Lester, because I'd like to show you exactly what we have out of that. This is Whiteman Air Force Base. It's in Missouri. You see a B-2 bomber. It is coming back from the very first night of shock and awe. These are the 2,000-pound bombs that I'm not personally familiar with them, but I believe that is the JDAM. Here's the message. Special delivery. Okay, that's Colonel Doug Rayberg who's signing the bomb bound for Baghdad. And in fact, they did deliver those bombs in there. Lester, it's a 34-hour ride from the time they took off to the time they got back. You know, we pull some long shifts here at MSNBC trying to bring the news of the war.
He is increasingly concerned about civilian casualties.
The President also receiving classified briefings as well as having lunch with the troops this afternoon before he returns to Washington. Later today, he's going to be meeting with British Prime Minister Tony Blair at Camp David for a one-day strategy session dealing with Iraq. He's going to have dinner with Mr. Blair as well as the First Lady, National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, and his Chief of Staff.
Had to come in order to support a continued drive to the north for the U.S. Marines in the 1st Division. The Fedayeen, though, have been launching these attacks, that is, using, well, gunfire and also using mortars and RPGs. And they have been hitting along some critical areas of that supply line, very much in the area where we are now. So you've got this massive amount of fuel in huge lumbering tankers coming in, obviously a prime target. And how do you protect it? Well, that's what we were out on all last night. And for a long time, it was a running pitch battle of the armored vehicles and the part of the Marines and the Humvees racing through the night, opening fire with Marines firing out of the top of those armored vehicles, returning the fire that they were receiving from the other side in the pitch black darkness. And that's something to point out. This is the marshland area. Very tough, difficult terrain. Night vision goggles were of no use last night because it was just pitch black. You need some illumination. And so you have gunfire going off, you have vehicles racing through the night. The one vehicle we were on ran into a Humvee, and then after that we got backed into by another armored vehicle that sent us all flying inside. And then we ran into a building, ran into a house.
They expect to be given those orders, move forward into battle, and that's the battle that these forces have been waiting for, because frankly, and we've said this before, for their opinion, if they can get to Baghdad, get beyond those Republican Guard and Special Republican Guard forces, it just means that they're one day closer to home. For now, I'm David Bloom.
Iraqis have been surrendering, all in civilian clothing, almost all young men, suggesting they are deserters rather than refugees. One family did get out. Ali, with her 18-year-old son and 12-year-old daughter, broke through the battle lines this morning.
Well, she said a lot of civilians got killed in the bombardment, and that's why they ran away.
Her daughter spoke of days of fear.
She stayed in my room and constantly crying. She was frightened.
1,000 men are tied down here. This was not in the plan. James Mates, ITV News.
Residential neighborhood inside the Capitol. 7:15 this morning, these gruesome pictures were seen in the U.S. The Pentagon denies firing into the area. It says it is possible, though, a U.S. missile accidentally went astray, or perhaps even an Iraqi one went astray. 8:20 Eastern, CENTCOM first comments on the matter, and then a top Iraqi official had his own response.
We don't know that those were ours. We can't say that we had anything to do with that at this point. Once we have more information.
And I was out there with my crew for about an hour, and we looked at the wreckage, and we talked to local people.
This is civilian area? Total civilian.
And the whole area was devastated. Two sides of a wide street, storefronts blowing in. There were 20 cars burning. Newsmen had been there earlier, counted 15 scorched corpses, and they said there were 30 or 40 wounded. When these missiles came into the city today, the city was relatively crowded. A lot of people on the streets. They're out doing shopping at barbecue stalls. The cars are driving around. Again, this is a city used to crisis, and I think they had a full sense of security. And the government claims there are absolutely no government or military installations in that area.
The American mercenaries and the British mercenaries, they are defending themselves inside Iraq. They are in a defensive position. They are defensive, self-defense. They are fighting a self-defense war inside Iraq. Well, congratulations, Mr. Biden. You are defending yourself inside our country. We will show you what defense means.